Hi everyone. In today's lecture, we're going to be focusing on middle childhood social and emotional development. As always, make sure to click through and look at any of the additional links or videos that are provided to support your knowledge as we are discussing this topic. To get started, I just wanted to focus a little bit on some theory. So first, let's think about Bandura's social cognition theory. So this is really focusing on the interactions with ourselves, other people, our behaviors, the environment, and it's really to support the relationship that we have with ourselves and the relationship that we have with others. And this is also when we can see that there is a development of self-concept, which we'll get into in the next slides. And also we're revisiting Erikson's psychosocial development, and we are focused here on the fourth stage where this occurs in middle childhood, and this is when children start to have mastery of tasks that lead to a sense of industry, and when there is failure, this precedes feelings of inferiority. So this is when children start to have a comparison of themselves with their peers. This is also when we start to see that there is an increase in the mastery of tasks and wanting to complete tasks, as well as an establishment of accomplishments and achievements. And we do see that when children have difficulty within school settings and with their peers, this can lead to a sense of inferiority. One of the important aspects that's discussed in social and emotional development for middle childhood is self-concept. So we do have knowledge of self-concept when we talked about early childhood years, but we see that within the elementary school setting, it becomes a bit more prominent in children's ideas of themselves and the beliefs that they hold about themselves and the responses that they have of others. So again, referencing back to Erikson's stages of development, as children are starting to master tasks, they have a sense of industry, and when they start to fail at tasks, this might have feelings of inferiority, and this inferiority can also come from when they are comparing themselves to others. And so when we're looking at self-concept, children have different ways of looking at their sense of self, and so they look at their ideal self, so this is who they'd like to become. They also look at their looking glass self, or the way that they perceive that others see them. Also their self-image, so how they feel about themselves. So there's many different aspects of a person's sense of self and their self-concept, and we do see that self-concept does come from attributes, abilities, and attitudes as well as values, whereas when we were in early childhood, we're more focused on appearances of ourselves and of others. And we also see that self-concept is basically a personal description of who we are as individuals and how we view ourselves. And so this is how we see our real self, in the sense of when nobody else is around, what we like or dislike about who we are as an individual. And we see that we're more focused on abstract internal traits or personality characteristics as opposed to those physical characteristics from early childhood. And we see that children start to begin to define who they are and have a distinguished self-definition of, this is who I am this person, these are the different traits that I have. So they start to establish a little bit that might correspond directly to their temperament. Again, self-concept can be an aspect of how others perceive us. So we might say, so-and-so is a really kind friend, and they're a kind friend because they help others on the playground when somebody falls down and gets hurt. I'm also a kind friend because I make sure to check in with everybody and see how they're feeling for the day. So we're able to describe more characteristics and internal traits about people as opposed to different appearances that they might have. And we see that self-esteem is one of the most critical concepts of self-concept, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. And we also see again that self-concept is directly related to our social relationships and group membership. This takes on a big significance in how we define ourselves. As we dive deeper into self-esteem, we're reflecting on the component of self-concept. So our self-esteem is that critical aspect of self-concept. And when we're looking at self-esteem, this is the sense of value or worth that we attach to ourselves. And so this is diving deeper into what kinds of judgments and ideas we hold and perceive about who we are as individuals, and the worth and feelings that are associated with those judgments. So again, this comes from the concept of self-concept, and we are diving deeper into how do I feel about myself when I've engaged in something. I am kind because of this. I'm making a judgment and I am having a feeling associated with a perceived idea of who I am as an individual. And this grows out of perceived competence and also our personal control. So looking at our beliefs around our ability to succeed at particular tasks. So when we're thinking about our mastery or failure rates, this produces feelings of industry or inferiority if we're thinking about Erikson's theory. And so this is directly connected to the self-esteem, the worth that I hold about who I am as an individual. And I hold myself to a higher standard when I'm making comparisons to those around me who might be engaging in the same types of tasks, but maybe they're completing them at a faster rate, or they're getting more praise and approval from adults within their environment. And so I'm taking this as a personal marker in my own competence and my own abilities and my own aspect and how I might control myself. So controlling aspects of myself and my environment can look like how I regulate my emotions, how certain situations might make me feel. So if somebody is to give me a look of disapproval, how is that going to make me feel in relationship to the task that is at hand? So maybe I didn't complete the lap that we were doing around the track in the same amount of time as somebody else. And so there was a disapproving look, or peers who are saying certain things towards me and my abilities, and how do I handle this? What kind of emotional response do I have to this? And how do I perceive how my abilities are within this particular task? And the social acceptance from peers, and when we have authoritative parenting. So this is our parenting style that has high responsiveness and warmth, as well as high control or moderate control. This is linked to higher rates of self-esteem. So when we have parenting styles or adult styles that are more authoritative, we are creating spaces where children can express themselves. We can have conversations about particular tasks that we may feel that are stressing us out and we feel that we are not as competent in. And an authoritative parenting style would allow us to have the opportunity to discuss this and discuss what our current goals might be, discuss what areas we are wanting to work on. Also, it's an opportunity for appropriate guidance to happen. And when we have this kind of social acceptance from our peers, we also see that our peers are encouraging us. They're helping us to regulate and manage our emotions. If we were to feel that we were failing at a task, they can give us words of encouragement. So I gave a little example here with the imagery of, I am capable, I am brilliant, I am kind. So thinking about different kinds of positive affirmations that we could gain from authoritative parenting or social acceptance from peers. And all of those aspects do contribute to higher rates of self-esteem. So again, they're connected directly to our worth and value of ourselves. On the next few slides, we're going to dive deeper into some factors that influence social and emotional development. So we are going to touch on elements of the family, the school, and our peers. So really looking at how each of these factors within our environment contribute to elements of how we are socially and emotionally. Specifically, we're going to be thinking about self-concept and self-esteem. So when we're looking at social cognition, this is again the dynamic relationship and interactions that we have between people in our lives, our own behaviors, and our environment. So when we're considering the context of our environment, this is happening within our home setting and our school setting, and then the people within those environments would be our family members, our parents, and then within our school setting, we also have our peers and our teachers. And so there are many people within the context of our immediate environments that are going to be supportive or not supportive potentially of our social and emotional health and well-being. Okay, so let's first start with family and parents. So specifically, we're going to talk about research related to parenting and what that looks like. We see that in middle childhood, children are more critical and evaluate their parents in different kinds of aspects than they did during early childhood. So this does tap into the approval and disapproval that they desire during this time. And so we're seeing that caregiver responsiveness as well as different kinds of parental attitudes in child rearing become more apparent in regards to the warmth and acceptance, and again, that authoritative parenting style in regard to children's higher self-esteem. And we do see that there is a shift in the kind of guidance and parenting that is provided. So although we still want to obtain for an authoritative parenting style where we have high responsiveness and warmth as well as moderate to high control, we start to see that there is less monitoring of children's activities as opposed to when they were in early childhood. And we're seeing that there is less direct feedback than in the preschool years, and there's more co-regulation that's happening in middle childhood, as well as children having a better sense of what appropriate behaviors are, social expectations, and rules within their environment. So we see that there is still a level of guidance, but that co-regulation piece is extremely important for parents and children. So I'm now just giving opportunities for children to talk openly about how a situation made them feel. We're diving deeper into the context of the situation. Maybe we're getting more into, what was the certain situation that occurred that might have made you feel frustrated, or what did you want to accomplish during the time frame of this situation when you and your peer were having a conflict, or when you disagreed with somebody on the playground. What happened? Tell me a little bit more about that. Or if we're having a discussion at the dinner table with our family members and we're talking about the rules or the chores or tasks that each individual family member is set out to do, and there's a disagreement or there wasn't an upholding element within the expectations for, cleaning my room as a child. Maybe we talk about that in a little bit more detail. And instead of giving corrective or direct feedback, we can have an open conversation about what each person is contributing. Your text goes into a little bit more detail on some research related to some diverse family groups. And so they talked also a little bit about the influence of LGBTQ families, families of divorced parents, as well as families with different levels of parental employment. And so there were some instances that discussed that children of divorced parents may have increased conduct disorders, lower self-esteem, increased drug use, and potentially poor academic skills. And this could be due to experience with different kinds of child rearing differences within their parenting styles. There is also research to show that within LGBTQ families, children may have more difficulty engaging in social settings because of different ideas related to lesbian or gay parenting. But we do see that research shows that regardless of this family dynamic, there isn't any difference within how children's sexual orientation pans out, as well as support within the environment for parenting, that parents of LGBTQ plus I, they do not have differences in their ability to provide warmth and acceptance and authoritative parenting, and that children still can have the same increased self-esteem and academic skills as non-LGBTQ parents. We also see that parental employment, when maternal parents are having increased employment, that egalitarian values are more apparent and increased, and so children value the roles and responsibilities and rights of both genders within the household, and so this can be supportive of different kinds of non-traditional gender roles and reducing stereotypical gender roles within the household setting. And also this is supportive of then leading into the school and the peers settings that we might see. And in addition, just kind of wrapping back, making sure that we're paying attention to the different aspects of the early years. So family influences and parental influences don't just start in middle childhood, but they start when adults have responsiveness within the infant and toddler years, and this should continue throughout middle childhood. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk a little bit about schools and teachers. So one thing that I wanted to start with is just kind of thinking about critical factors that we may look at when it comes to school readiness. And so some of the ones that your text talks about that I wanted to focus on are the importance of diversity and inequity of children's early life experiences, as well as individual differences in young children's development and learning. And last but not least, the degree to which children's schools establish reasonable and appropriate expectations of children's capabilities when they enter school. So the reasons why it's important to think about these aspects as an influence on social emotional development is because one of the key indicators of school readiness is if children have high social and emotional learning competencies. And we see that when social emotional learning is at a still point or is decreased, that this impacts all other areas of academic learning. And we see that, unfortunately, on average, there are school reports that 10 to 20% of incoming kindergartners have difficulty adjusting to kindergarten itself. And this could be better supported if we had more opportunities to create school and teacher interactions for children related to social and emotional learning. So thinking about welcoming meetings, greetings with children, check-ins, and we see that when children are entering school, when they have language and math difficulties, that this deficit early on can continue throughout the first few years of the school year. And so we need to consider that some of these areas of language, mathematics, cognition, and other academic skills that children are typically being tested on within the school systems could be increased if we focus more on school readiness related to social and emotional learning. And one of these elements that could be targeting to lower social and emotional competencies is something called the Pygmalion effect. And this is specifically focusing on expectations that teachers hold for students. And so this is noted as a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's an expectation that is confirmed because of the behavior of those who hold the expectation. So we specifically utilize this element of self-fulfilling prophecy related to teachers and to students. So teachers have subtle messages that they might send about children's abilities. So again, when we think about ability, let's relate it back to Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, and he's thinking about during middle childhood inferiority versus industry, or I'm sorry, industry versus inferiority. Switch those up, but you get what I'm saying. And so those mastery of tasks that leads us to a sense of industry, if we're having subtle messages about our abilities related to those tasks, this could proceed us to having higher rates of failure or higher rates of self-doubt within our abilities to complete tasks. We also might see that if teachers are sending subtle messages about expectations and they have expectations that are higher for some students and lower for other students, this is when we can see also an increase in comparisons between peers. And so children are becoming more adept to reading different cues. So this could be a look or a comment. It could be a grade that is presented to us. It could be a teacher outing us in class and asking us to produce an answer. Maybe we don't know it, or we haven't had the opportunity to showcase in the kind of method that is appropriate for our learning and our abilities. And then they start to adopt others' opinions of their capabilities based on these subtle messages, based on these expectations. So if a teacher holds you to a high expectation and says, you know what, you're an amazing student, you do wonderful things in the classroom, you're always helping your peers, you're always on task, you're always making sure that you are paying attention in class, well, I'm going to feel pretty great about myself. My teacher says I'm on top of things, I'm always getting good grades, I'm always seeing and receiving messages from my peers, my teachers, my school, and then that's being related to my home, and my parents are saying that. But on the opposite end, if I'm hearing, oh, you're always late to class, come on, are you paying attention? Focus attention up here. Maybe your name is being called on every single time to answer questions, and it's embarrassing for you and you feel intimidated. And when you're put on the spot, maybe it produces higher feelings of performance anxiety. And so then you are retreating back into that aspect of your self-esteem and your self-worth and thinking, well, I'm just not capable of this. I'm always off task. I'm having a hard time paying attention. So my teacher just doesn't think I'm capable. And so I did include 2 videos that I'd like you to check out. The first one is a bit longer, and it mainly just goes into the Pygmalion effect in a bit more detail. So if you'd like to learn a bit more about that and kind of explore that concept, I'd recommend checking that video out. It is a bit longer, but it is useful if this concept is something that you need a bit more information on. But the main one that I want you to check out is the second one, and it's the check-in and check-out. Excuse me, and this is providing a daily support system for students. So this is thinking about how we can create expectations that are supportive to all students, and that we want to consider the elements of diversity and inequity, considering individual differences, and considering holding children to reasonable and appropriate expectations. Last but not least, let's talk about the influence of peers and environments. So mainly when we're thinking about these elements, they can be connected to both at a school context as well as within a home or local community context. So it's important to consider the element of peers and the influence that they have on children's self-esteem. So when children are well liked by their peers, they have a higher self-esteem, and we see that there is a correlational relationship between peers during middle childhood, and we see that relationships of peers are based on the quality of their friendships. And so children around middle childhood typically start to have around 2 to 4 best friends. Again, we're thinking about how these friendships are going to connect to the abilities that we currently have, the kinds of tasks that we're involved in, the interests that we have, and we can actually see that studies show that children do look into the quality of their friendships, and the measurements of those can be related specifically to the amount of support that friends can provide, so different help and guidance, and this taps back into the different elements of how children might feel about themselves or perceive others. So if we perceive somebody as being kind and helpful and generous, we're more likely to value the quality of that relationship as a higher standard and like this person more, and then this contributes to higher self-esteem for ourselves as well as others. So not only being well liked by others, but when we have friends that we put at a higher standard, this also relates back to our own self-esteem and self-concept. We also see that there's an importance in the exchange between the friendships, so that give and take, thinking kind of back to when we discussed in the infant and toddler lectures, that serve and return element. So how do we provide serve and return within our friendships? So I'm not only going to be providing acts of service and kind deeds towards you, but I expect that in return. So respect for you, respect for me, that's an important aspect within a quality friendship. Also, we want somebody who is caring, provides us with validation. This can support and relate directly back to the different parenting styles that we have. So children who have more authoritative parenting styles are more likely to seek out friendships and be well liked by their peers. They're more likely to have higher self-esteem, which relates directly back to the types of individuals that they're going to seek out for friendships. So thinking back to the different parenting styles and what different parenting styles might look like for how children are feeling about themselves, and then how they might interact within a peer group. And we also see that there's an importance in problem solving and conflict resolution. So if there was an argument or a discrepancy between myself and my peer, what does that look like for how we're going to handle that problem? And so we see that aggressive children, they may be more popular, but that doesn't mean that they are more liked by their peers. And we see that when children are more pro-social, they tend to be more popular because they're helpful, cooperative, likable. Cooperative skills are extremely important within a peer relationship. And in terms of types of aggressive behavior, we do see that there are some slight gender differences in that boys are more likely to engage in physical aggression and girls are more likely to engage in verbal aggression. And in instances of cyber bullying and aggression, this is pretty common throughout both genders, so boys and girls. Now, this also does depend on the usage of technology within middle childhood and what children might have access to. We also see that the physical environment plays a key role within children's self-concept and self-esteem. So when we think about the different kinds of materials that we provide, so even when we're in our home setting, there's different kinds of materials and opportunities. So if we're creating developmentally appropriate challenges and providing materials that reflect where children's learning is currently at, this does support elements of them being able to master different tasks, as well as being able to have a sense of accomplishment and a sense of achievement within their environment. So if we provide them with different kinds of mathematic building blocks such as Unifix cubes, and we're asking them to do a word problem and utilize Unifix cubes within this, these would be opportunities that could have developmentally appropriate materials and challenges to support success within children's environments and helping them to feel competent and comfortable with new things that they might be doing.